Words matter.
Welcome to the Words Matter podcast. We are here in Brooklyn today, but in a different location. We are in Donut Shop Studios with super engineer, mixing engineer, Ayanna Depas, Grammy winning, can't forget that, Grammy winning recording engineer or mixing engineer, Ayanna Depas, to the left of me for everybody who's watching and for everybody who's listening. How are you?
Hello. I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. So thank you for being here because you had to come a long way.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so thank you so much for being here. Who are you?
Who am I? That's I don't know. It's a hard question to answer. I am me. No. No. I really don't know. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by who am I?
So what makes you you? What makes you tick? Like, what makes you be the person who you are and decide to go on the path that you're on?
I guess it would be how I was raised. My mother and my grandmother are big contributing factors to that. My grandmother actually, when I was really young, had this, it's a long story, but from a child's perspective, I was in a devastated state because we were playing Power Rangers and they told me I couldn't be the blue Power Ranger. That was my favorite color. They were like, your favorite color can't be blue. You're a girl. You got to be the pink one or the yellow one. And I was devastated. And I remember going inside. I was like, well, I'm not playing then. And my grandma was like, what's wrong with you? And I was just like, nothing. And she forced me to tell her. And in that moment, she was just like, don't let anybody tell you what you can and cannot do. You can be whatever you want. She didn't understand what Power Rangers were, but it was solid advice.
So you didn't even think that was going to turn into a deep moment?
No, but it was. Like, I took it with me the rest of my life. I'm like, I could do whatever I want. Like, just that kid. I could do what I wanted to do, Yeah. I think I might have been about 5 around the time when she told me it. So, yeah.
It was like your Uncle Ben, Peter Parker, sitting in the car moment.
Exactly. Exactly. So, yeah. I take that mindset into everything, even when I am feeling a little insecure about the situations I'm in, or if I don't think I'll thrive in a certain situation. I go, you know what? Try it. Like, if you fail, try it again. And eventually it's a numbers game. Probability wise, if you do something enough times, you're going to succeed at it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
So, how did you become an engineer?
I got into engineering because it was weird. I used to, I guess it was like a management role for my cousin. Literally, I would do anything he needed, because he was a rapper and we didn't have a big team, but it was me, him, and my friend, and whatever he needed, I would do it. And I remember one time he needed skits for his mixtape.
Yeah.
And I started saying, all right, you know what? I don't know how to do that, but I'm going to figure it out. Long story short, I had this program called Cool Edit.
Back in the day, I remember Cool Edit.
Yeah.
I remember back.
And I would take these snippets from YouTube or whatever, and I'll chop them up, and that's how I got into it. But I didn't even know that was a job or what that was until I started working with him, and we were in recording studios, and that was my exposure to what a recording engineer and a mixing engineer was.
Yeah.
And we didn't necessarily like the sound quality we were getting. And I was also in school for something I wasn't sure I wanted to do.
What were you in school for?
I was in school for occupational therapy. Okay. Well, actually, I didn't even enter the program yet. I might have went to orientation, and we were sitting there, And the lady was like, if you don't have a driver's license, which I still don't, this probably isn't the job for you. And I was like, whatever. Like, I'll learn how to drive or whatever. And she's like, if you're the type of person that empathizes with people's problems, this isn't the job for you. And I'm like, that can't be a bad thing to empathize with people's problems. I feel like when you empathize with people's problems, you can help them. And then she just kept throwing these things out there. I'm like, is this a sign? So I tuned her out the rest of orientation. I started writing a list of goals. Well, first I figured out what did I like. I only liked two things at the time. I like music and I like basketball. But then I'm
Yeah.
like, you don't, you can't sing, you don't really write, you can't dance, you don't produce. What are you gonna do with music?
Yeah.
And I was gonna go for production, but once I found out what an engineer was, I ended up taking that route and wrote that list. And the crazy thing is, I gave myself 10 years to do all of that. I was like, you know what? If you're not successful in 10 years, go back to school. I literally did everything on that list in 9 years. It was crazy.
Wow.
I couldn't even believe that I did it. But I was like, you know what? Guess I'm here to stay. But that's essentially how I got into being an engineer.
So what are some of the things on that list?
Um, I guess work with I don't like the term A list celebrity. I hate
Yeah.
that, but it was something along that route. It's like,
Like commercially
yeah,
successful artists.
commercially, yeah.
Yeah.
Look at you. Yeah, commercially successful artists. I also put plaques on there. I also put a Grammy on there. What else? Those are the things. I wish I actually kept the list, but I for sure remember those things being on there. And also being able to consistently do it and make a living off of it, like pay my bills. And I was just like, you know what? If you're not able to do that in a 10 year span, school
Yeah.
will always be here. You can always come back to be an occupational therapist. And I, long story short, I haven't gone back because I've been blessed enough to be able to succeed in all the things that I wanted to do.
And I forgot to mention this. Me and Ayanna, this is definitely a trend in words matter thus far. Is from Spring Valley, New York, my hometown. Again, another person from Spring Valley, New York.
Yes.
Yeah.
845.
Word. Shout out to 845. Shout out to Spring Valley. Was there anyone locally that influenced you to become an engineer? I mean, I know you did it out of necessity before you even knew what it really was with your cousin, but was there anyone locally that you were just hanging out with, or you just knew to be an engineer, or you just saw it? Yeah.
Actually, yeah. My cousin Chris, goes by Hood, I believe. He's into very talented dude. Like he does a lot of stuff, and I think everything he does, he's actually really good at it.
Yeah.
He does videography, engineering, I believe production. I've even heard him. I don't know if he was making those records just to demo them because he was writing, or if he was thinking about pursuing an artist career. But I've heard some songs that he made, and they were like actually really good.
Yeah.
He was the first person that made me realize like, oh, like this is a job. One time, me and my other cousin, the one I was working with, um, went to his house and he had a setup in his basement, and he had made like it was a pretty sizable closet, but he had made it like a booth or whatever. And I just remember him having like this desk with this huge monitor, and he's just
Yeah.
editing, and I was just like overwhelmed looking at it.
What was he
And
editing?
um just I guess other people that have came there to record
Yeah.
prior to our recording time. And I think he was actually using FL Studios to do it too. And I didn't even know because I was so new to it that you could record in FL Studios. Most of the times when I saw people use it, they were like making beats or whatever. And yeah, he was the first person that made me realize like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. And then that's when I had more hope like, oh, this is what I can do in music.
Yeah.
Because learning how to be a musician, I never really played an instrument. I always wanted to, but I didn't have that opportunity growing up. Um just watching him do that, I was like, oh, this is fire, and I think I can do this. And he was encouraging of it too.
Yeah.
So,
What would your cousin Chris say to you now?
yeah. I think he's proud of me.
Yeah.
I think he's proud of me. I still talk to him, not as often as I should, but um, yeah, we've actually even worked together a few times since, because he was part of this label. And they had a roster of artists, which is crazy because I think the whole roster was family, and I didn't realize how much talent was in my
Wow.
family. And there's a few things that I helped him with because I guess he had a lot on his plate at the time. But yeah, you know, I think he's proud of me.
Yeah. Is he still at it?
Yeah, I believe so. But again, he does do a lot, and I remember at one point he was focusing more on the videography stuff. But I'm pretty sure he's still doing it.
Yeah.
Like there's no way he's not. Like you know.
Seems like family's a big influence on well, subconsciously, I guess, with your mom and your grandmother. I guess they were telling you, uh, in a way, I don't know. I guess because people kind of associate engineering with men.
Hmm.
Um, because when you're in the studio and you see a bunch of rappers, you probably just see like a nerdy white dude at the at the computer with a black shirt, looking look looking like so out of place. But that you're into something. Nobody, you're saying nobody ever. Your grandma told you that. Don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't do something. So I
Hmm.
guess that kind of subconsciously led you into becoming an engineer.
I guess so. I
Yeah.
didn't even, when I first pursued it or even going to audio school, I think once I arrived at audio school, I realized it was male dominated. It never even crossed my mind prior to that because uh, one woman who did put the battery in my back, her name's, she goes by Incredible Lago. She's a dope engineer. Um, when I heard about her and it was just like a similar situation, I don't believe she had any musical experience.
Hmm.
I think she might have just started when she went to school. I'm not sure completely on those details, but just the similarities in her story just made me go, all right, I'm definitely going to audio school. Like
Yeah.
once I came across her, I was like, okay, for sure, I'm gonna do this. But what was your question? You said something about family influences.
Yeah. Just because I was gonna go into how being a recording engineer or mixing engineer is not a traditional path,
Mm.
and a lot of times people's family push them into a more traditional path.
Yeah.
But you had family that made music. You had your cousin who was editing, and even in a way with people telling you that you can't wear blue or you can't like the color blue.
Hmm.
I feel like that almost pushed you into the direction of doing something non-traditional.
That's probably I never even thought about that. You're probably on to
Yeah.
something. You're probably on to something there. Um, but yeah, I think I guess because I was pretty much a tomboy growing up. I was into sports. I didn't really want to play with dolls. I liked action figures
Yeah.
and stuff like that. And I, thankfully, I was in an environment where I was told those things were okay.
Hmm.
Like, nobody really made a big deal about
Yeah.
it in my immediate family. And also, my cousin that I was working with, he's like my brother. We grew up together, very young. Um, he had a lot of toys. He's not gonna like that sentence, but he was a little spoiled. He had a lot, a lot of toys, and which probably is why I was interested in those things too. But I was into a lot of things he was into because we were like around that age, very inseparable. Um, and family is a huge influence in that because those were my cousins were my first friends. I come from a really big family. My
Yeah.
grandma was one of 12, and she was also a twin, and my cousin was actually adopted by my grandmother's twin at a young age, and we've been inseparable ever since. I don't even know. I don't have a first memory of him. We were just
Wow.
like inseparable since then. So yeah, it was. Yeah, family is very influential in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there any music growing up that you heard when I mean, what age did you start getting into, like when your cousin had you record for him? What age was that?
I might have been 19 or 20
19
at
or
the
20?
time. Yeah.
Were there any songs prior to that growing up, or just any music in general prior to that that made you say, like, something on that needs to be fixed, or did you always have that air?
No, I didn't, and it's crazy. Like there's songs that I love that I revisited later on in life after
Like,
pursuing
this is bad.
engineering, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, oh man.
Yeah.
Eventually, you go through that phase where you're hypercritical of everything,
Yeah.
because you're learning and it's
Yeah.
so new, and then eventually you just accept it as like this is that person's style or taste, and you accept it as art.
Hmm.
There's no really right or wrong way to do it. There's certain things that might be unpleasant, uh, but still, like I can't say it's bad because there's usually other elements in it that I'm like, yo, that's fire. I wonder how they did that,
Yeah.
Um, but I guess uh, growing up, my mom, like, all black parents, you clean the house, they listen to whatever they're listening to. My
Yeah.
mom was really into R&B and soul music. I remember listening to like things like Luther Vandross, Sam Cooke,
Hmm.
Jackie Wilson. I feel like the most hip hop we ever got was Lauryn Hill.
Yeah.
you know, and I think to this day, a lot of those things still sound, great,
Yeah.
especially for the time frame.
Yeah.
But the things that I started listening to when I started getting my own music, there's a lot of stuff that I was just like, oh wow, like I didn't even realize like this person may be a little flat when they're
Hmm.
singing, or like, oh, that note was pretty bad. I didn't start developing that ear until uh probably when I started getting be able to notice it. My first assistant gig, I was probably about 22 at the time. So yeah.
Yeah. Do you think there's a better way to? Because what I was told, there's three kinds of engineers. There's recording engineer, mixing engineer, and
Mastering engineer.
mastering engineer.
Mhm.
Do you do which ones do you do?
Recording engineer and mixing. Mostly. Um, the beginning stages of my career was mostly recording, and I would say I started dabbling more into mixing. I mean, I did do some mixes prior to this, but I started dabbling more for sure during the pandemic.
Yeah.
Uh, because it was a whole shift. Recording studios, like nothing was really open, and if it later on it was open, you were kind of skeptical to go. Um, and that forced me to stay home and create a space where I can mix
Yeah.
because you had to make money. And even though the whole world was kind of like shut down, you still had to pay rent.
Yeah.
So I started investing in a lot of software like plugins and things like that.
Mhm.
A couple of pieces of gear, and I just started, yeah, whatever money when I got money, it just went back into the craft.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm doing mixing a lot more these days, and uh, my new thing is to my new goal is to really be like the goat. Like I want to
Yeah.
be one of those mixing engineers, not like, oh, she's a dope female engineer. Nah, I just want to
Yeah.
be dope. Like
Yeah.
period.
Who is the go to you as far as mixing engineers?
Oh wow, I don't really. I don't know. What's crazy? I don't have many favorite things, but favorite color is probably one of
Yeah.
those things. But I like all the variations
Yeah.
of blue, so I guess technically still no. But Some of my favorites these days, like I've been listening to and I studying a lot of uh Tony Maserati mixes. Cause it's it's crazy. He doesn't do like it's like a lot of stuff he does is just it's subtle, but at the same time you hear it and you feel it. It's just like it it could I guess strike like certain emotions out of you. So I've been listening to that, especially what he does with depth and things like that, as
Yeah,
well as I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. I don't want to butcher it, but Sermon is it Genna? I don't. I'm unclear how to pronounce his name. He
yeah,
don't really do interviews like that either, so that doesn't help. Like that's usually if I don't know how to say somebody's name, I'll go watch an interview and see how they pronounce it.
yeah,
But yeah, like I really like what he does with depth as well, and even the clarity in his high end. Uh, I'm just like, yo, that's amazing because sometimes when you start adding high end to stuff, it can am I getting too nerdy with your audience even? Because they're
no,
like,
I
what are you
mean
talking about?
it's for
Okay.
everybody. Everybody,
Okay.
should have the
Yeah.
opportunity to learn about these things.
Yeah, sometimes when you add it, it can be abrasive and painful, like it's like very sibility, like like
Yeah,
I don't necessarily like that, but and then you'll try to fix it by using something like a de-esser, and then I don't like how that compromises the audio. So sometimes I'll spend a lot of time trying to find a happy medium between the two. But I just go and listen to his stuff, and I'll just be like, "Yo, this is crazy! Like I don't know how
yeah,
this man did that." And then you'll hear like his drums, and like it's just a well balanced mix across the spectrum. So him and Tony Maserati for sure are a couple of my favorites. And then there's other people like I'll listen to like what certain mixing engineers do with effects, and I'm like, yo,
yeah,
that was fire. But in terms of like the fundamentals of it, the hard stuff, like I find that what they do is the hard stuff, the effects. I feel like they come a little bit more natural to me. I could easily do those.
hmm
But yeah,
What genres do they usually mix?
I hear Servant do a lot of pop stuff like
Yeah,
Ariana Grande. He did Silk Sonic album. Um, who else? It's just a lot of pop stuff.
yeah,
Katy Perry, Haley Steinfeld, like artists like that.
okay.
I did hear him do a hip hop mix with that I'm familiar with. The one with Nicki Minaj, Drake, Lil Wayne, and I think Chris Brown is on it.
Um,
What was it called? Um,
I can't even think of the name of the song right now.
yeah, it was on
It
her
came out like
album.
2014 or something like that,
Nah, actually,
or 2015. It was. Was it
was
on
it that long ago? I don't
Was
think
it
it was
on
that long ago.
the Pink Print? Maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know what
It's
you're talking
called
about.
Only.
Yeah, only. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Uh,
was about to sing the song
yeah, I was trying to avoid it too. Like I'm not gonna embarrass myself like that.
right.
That mix is really clean and dope. Tony, he'll do pop as well as hip hop as well as like he's done stuff for Jay Z, Beyonce. Um, who else? There's this one Kaylani mix that I was listening to that I really liked on that project. Um,
Her most recent project.
I know the song's called "Nights Like This." I don't remember the name of the album or what
Okay.
the album is called, but yeah, like his catalog is probably a little bit more diverse, but I'm not too familiar with
Yeah.
Sermon in that way. I just know a lot of his pop
Yeah.
mixes, besides like the Nicki Minaj record, which
Yeah.
is we
Yeah.
were just talking about. But yeah,
Were you one of those people, or are you one of those people where you can't really do it now because there's not people not really buying physical copies of music, but you know those people that open a CD and read the liner notes and check like
I
who was the engineer on this.
for sure 9 out of 10 times that's the first thing I was looking at. I'll just be like, oh, who's the engineer? Then I'll
Yeah.
go back and see who the songwriters
Yeah.
were, who the producers are. Sometimes you could just tell, especially since producers have tags now.
Yeah.
But sometimes sonically you can just tell. And I'm starting to get like that with mixing engineers too, where I'm
Mm.
just like, oh, I know who did this.
Wow.
But yeah, with nowadays, like, you can still do it. It's just dependent upon whether the artist or the label included the credits, because you can
Yeah,
go on title or
title. Yeah, title's like the only place where you can actually see the credits.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I still do that. Honestly, I do like title because you can click on the engineer's name, or like,
Oh wow,
and then you can just see everything that their name is
wow.
on. And I'm like, yo, this is dope. This
I've
is
used
making
title
it,
in a while.
yeah, it's making it makes it easier to, I guess, study these styles and mixes. You know?
Yeah. Do you think that a lot of there's only like a handful of engineers that I've heard of that are that whose names you always hear of. Without saying any names, do you think is there anybody who gets too much of a good reputation?
Mm, no, I'm
Yeah.
actually, when engineers get like if there's a popular engineer, I'm like happy because nobody
Yeah.
really talks about the
Yeah.
engineer that much. Uh, I can't think of anyone that I think is overrated.
Yeah.
No.
What is the difference between a recording engineer, mixing engineer, and a mastering engineer?
Ooh. Okay. A recording engineer is, they're capturing the sound or the recording. Um,
Live.
yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes, depending on who else is in the room, they're there, like, kind of directing or dictating the vibe in a way.
Yeah.
Because depending on how experienced the artist is, they may be vocal producing.
Mm.
You're like, oh, sing it this way.
Yeah.
Switch your cadence here, things like that. Um, and then also sonically, like, yeah, like it's almost like the blueprint of it all. Like, they're capturing the emotion of
Yeah.
certain things like that. And then the mixing engineer, what I guess they do is what I guess this is like what I do for a living. But I'm trying to put it into words. Um, they kind of take all of that once they get everything that was recorded, whether it was a band or maybe it was just a vocalist, and then you'll get the producers multi-track files,
Hmm.
and they're blending it all together so everything sounds cohesive. Certain things don't jump out at you unless it was intentional. It's just like it's a cleaning up of everything and making all these sounds work together. If Is that a good
Yeah.
description? And then the mastering engineer, what they do is, and that is a whole art form on its own. I shout out to all the mastering
Yeah.
engineers. Um, they're taking the final product of that mix, um, like the enhanced version of the song after the recording,
Yeah.
and they're polishing it up. It's almost like and making sure that it translates well across like all mediums, whether it's streaming
Yeah.
or CD, which people don't really do anymore,
Yeah.
vinyl. Some people, people are really into vinyl, so
Vinyl's
things
coming
like
back.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is the mastering engineer's job. Like,
Yeah.
it's like polishing it all up.
So that are you so
No, I'm
okay?
done.
Yeah. So yeah, I always wanted to know that because I've always felt like the music that you hear on the radio is different than it sounds different than when you hear it in a CD or when you're streaming.
Mhm.
Always sounds you always hear more of the instrumentation, like it sounds louder. It sounds is designated more almost, where when you hear it on the radio you don't really hear those elements as much. So is that like the mastering engineer? That's there the reason why it sounds so different?
Um, I'm not really too familiar, excuse me, with the process of exactly what they're doing. If they have different versions for
Yeah.
different elements, I think
Yeah.
they do. But I think part of the issue with radio is because, like, you're broadcasting over these radio waves. They
Yeah.
have to compress
Press
it
it. Yeah.
so much that I'm not sure if that would make you think that you hear the softer things
Yeah.
louder, but you might not. The experience might not be the same
Hmm.
because everything is just kind of like
Yeah.
there versus if you're listening to it streaming or or on a CD or
Yeah.
vinyl, it is not as compressed.
Hmm.
So it you can experience the depth a little bit more, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Like, and that is crazy. Like people, it's just an underrated.
Or underappreciated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Because there's some times where I guess a lot of people don't do this anymore. But if a new album comes out, I'll sit there. I'm like, yo, you know what? I didn't listen to it yet because I want to take the time to actually
Yeah.
appreciate the whole project. And I'll sit there, whether it's in like headphones or on my rig at home, and I'll sit there and go like, whoa, like that
Hmm.
was dope. Even what they do with panning, like from one ear to the other,
Yeah.
things
I
like
love
that.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah,
And is that a mastering thing? Like when you might hear a sound, like you hear it in one speaker and you hear the other speaker.
that's a mixing thing.
Oh, that's a mixing thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. The mixing engineer has more flexibility because they have all the files, whether it's one
Yeah.
vocal, background vocal one, background vocal two, depending on how many background vocals in it, snare, kick, piano, so that's all the mixing engineer.
Hmm. Many kids, specifically black kids, have aspirations of becoming a singer or a rapper. The the jobs that have the spotlight.
Mm-hmm.
What makes a young black person want to become an engineer?
You know what? I That's a great question. Like I said, I kind of like fell into it a little bit. And I think once I went to school and started learning more about it, that's when I fell in love with it.
Yeah.
Uh, well, what would make I guess if that young black kid is in the similar situation I was in, where it's just like I believe in this and this is my spot on the team. Let's figure out how
Yeah.
to get this done. And it's so cool because I hear a lot of these younger kids uh, who are mixing from home. Like a few years ago, some of it you can tell, but some of them I'm like, yo, this is really impressive.
Mm.
Like, I don't know if it's the combination of the technology or them just studying the craft more. And maybe the resources are there now where you can learn certain
Yeah.
things. But yeah, I'm starting to hear some stuff from a lot of younger kids, and I'm like, yo, this is really dope.
Is there any music now that you hear, like you could just name off the top of your head, where that the mixing is just so amazing?
Um, yeah, I guess so. I mean, I liked a lot of stuff on I guess Jasmine Sullivan's album.
Yeah.
Um, it was just it fit the experience. The mixing that they didn't take away from it. But there are like various mixing engineers on that project, but there was one that I wasn't really familiar with until her album, and I believe he's a producer as well. I think his name is Joe Gallagher, and I like a lot of stuff he did on her project for sure. Like I'll go and check a lot of songs that resonated the most with me. He
Yeah.
did.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Joe Gallagher.
I believe that's his
Shout out to Joe Gallagher.
name. Yeah. Trying to think of anything else I listened to recently.
What is what are some of the best engineered songs or music or albums that you've ever heard? You can think of.
Hmm. Dang. Sorry. I can't nothing's really coming to mind
Yeah.
right now. I really did like last Train to Paris.
Mm.
Uh that was a really cool experience. Um what else? Huh. That's the only thing that's coming to mind, but again, I think
Yeah.
Sermon might have
Yeah.
mixed that. And that's what's crazy. Like I'll go back and I'm like, oh wow, like that's actually what put me on his radar. I started to like things, and I'm
Yeah.
like, who did this? Who did this? And then you see who did it, and his name will come up. But I'm trying to think. I find that albums that are kind of done by the same person usually I like those more because there's like a continuity to
Yeah.
it. Um, but yeah, and I think maybe he might have did that. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. He
Hmm.
might have did that whole album, which is why that was one of the first things that came to mind. He also did do Silk Sonic, but don't don't kill me. I have not listened to that album in its entirety yet, so
I listen
that's
to it.
why I can't really uh s- judge that. But I did like the songs that I did hear off of it.
Yeah.
So I still have to sit down and experience that album.
Talk about albums like that. It has a nostalgic feel to it.
Mhm.
How do you how do you create that or recreate nostalgia in music through mixing? Do you want it to sound like the time period that you're kind of trying to that is directly influenced by, or are you trying to have the same music but with a modern way of mixing?
Um,
Have you ever mixed something that has that nostalgic feel to it?
Let me think about that. It's possible. Um, Sometimes you kind of forget if you do a lot of stuff. You kind of forget certain things that you work on. But
Yeah.
I feel like maybe nothing is coming to mind right now. Oh, actually, yeah, I've done some like modern hip hop stuff, but it kind of had to have like that boom bap influence.
Yeah.
And I feel like what I would do to create that is to try to have like a warmer, fuller feel
Hmm.
versus now what music sounds like now. And there's certain things you can do as an engineer. You can just go back and listen to what the sound was like
Yeah.
because drums, especially volume wise, sit in a different place back then versus where they do now. Or like sometimes I feel like now it's just kind of like really in your face with certain people. Like
Hmm.
it's just there, and I love it. um, and then if you go back, especially like R&B, you could definitely hear it. It's not as in your face.
Yeah.
They do sound full or whatever, some of the mixes, but it's just not as present in the mix. And then there's things you can do with reverbs, like like the '80s had their own sound. I love '80s music. Just
The
like
synths and stuff. You like
yeah,
that?
and just
Hmm.
like the reverb that they use and how much they use on these records. Like I guess Phil Collins would be a good
Mm.
example of like something really reverberant. But I guess modern, like I really like what the weekend is doing, especially did he do that album with like Daft Punk or something like that?
Um, the one that had the song "I Feel It Coming" on it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a Daft. They produced that song.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So yeah, like just that sound. I would listen to that instrumental alone, like
Hmm.
just because I just love how it feels.
Kind of sounds like a It kind of sounds like a song that should have been on Off the Wall or Thriller.
Uh-huh. I see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, and I'm not like I'm starting to get more into the weekend by a referral. Crazy. I think
Yeah.
I had a conversation 2 weeks ago, and this guy was just telling me his appreciation for the weekend, and like why the weekend and his music resonate with him so much. And then sometimes hearing people talk about an artist makes you go, let me go like you know see what that's about.
Hmm.
So now I'm starting to listen to him a little bit more because prior to that, I guess I would just hear what you hear on the radio, what was popular,
Hmm.
But yeah.
Going back to nostalgia, have you ever mixed with analog?
Not fully. No. I don't have the privilege
Yeah.
because that stuff is expensive
Yeah.
and it wouldn't fit in my house. And like I said, I started getting more into mixing.
You don't want a 30,000 pound board in your room.
And Yeah, that'd be a lot on electricity
like
bill.
Dr. Dre in the Beats by Dre commercials, twisting a bunch of knobs.
I mean, it's ideal, yo. If I had it my way, I would. Yeah, like
Hmm.
if I could, I would. But like I said, I started getting more into mixing very recently during the pandemic, and I haven't really been in studios as much. But back when I was like being an assistant and at this space, they did allow us time to work in the room, especially me because I was there all the time. Um, it was partially because of how far I lived. Like
Yeah,
I would have to stay there. Like
yeah,
I would pretty much live there, and I would go home like when I need to wash clothes or something.
yeah,
And, um, I had a lot of time to be able to hear, but was I necessarily mixing on them? No, I was doing like just studying the sound of it, more
yeah,
extreme motions, like okay, this EQ has this sound and things like that. But yeah, I would love to be able to do
yeah,
that one day.
yeah. What do you think is better? Do you think that mixing, just engineering, the process of engineering, or the final product of what is engineered is better now or in the past? Or do you have a favorite era of mixing in music?
You know what? Um, there are certain elements that are better in the past, and I would say I really did like the '90s because I like things that are darker and warmer.
Yeah,
But again, things were a little bit more analog and like back then. But I can't take away from like what's happening now. There's so many new things now, like even like 808s and how people use those,
yeah,
and or just even the effects that they're doing. Like if you listen to Mixed by Ali stuff and the stuff he was doing with Kendrick, um it's just like music didn't really have those things back then. You might have had like some reverse reverb
yeah.
effects, but now you're getting like stutters and like you said, like these extreme movements from boom boom from one
Hmm.
side of headphones and things like that. And it just feel like like I have an appreciation for all eras thus far, like but I gravitate more towards warmer, darker sounds.
Yeah,
Not everybody likes it. I'm like, oh, you want me to make it brighter? I got you. I'll make it
yeah.
brighter. But if I'm mixing something, I usually go dark first.
So you don't really produce pop.
Um, I have mixed and pop stuff.
Yeah, but you're
Uh,
not using dark sounds on like pop, right?
this one girl, I swear, you know what? She did like the mix, but I was just like, nah, these drums. You know what? If she says something, I'll turn them down. But I was like, this, I'm gonna make the drums not,
Yeah,
like because I felt like there's there's sometimes you could add like especially because music now is like a fusion. You'll hear like so many different influences in different
hmm,
songs. I was like, I think I could get away with it in this particular song because it was like a lot of effects in it, almost like around like it was like dubstep influence. I was just
mm,
like, I think I could get away with it
yeah,
here. And I did have high end into it, but I feel like my mids were still very present too.
yeah,
But if I have to mix in that way, I would. I'm all about I mix my feelings, so if it feels like it could work,
yeah,
then I'm gonna do it,
yeah.
and then I'll let them tell me what they don't like about it afterwards, and then I'll just tweak it to their liking, or try to find a happy medium between both of our ideas.
Just to go further on that with like dark sounds and I guess lighter sounds. I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is the difference between mixing different genres? Like how do you mix different genres differently?
Um. Interesting. Some genres I guess one specific thing that I've noticed is different. Some genres are a little bit more reverberant, but also I'm noticing like with like drill and a lot of hip hop, a lot of them like more reverb.
Yeah.
Um, well, let's say something like maybe 5, 10 years ago, I would add it in there a little like subtly, like you could hear
Mm-hmm.
it, it was there, but it wasn't really as present as like how some of these guys like them now, or girls. Um, and I would say there's something definitely different in the style of compression, especially with hip hop. I find that I do a lot more of it versus R&B. It's more of a lighter compression. It's not as heavily compressed, depending on the type of song. Because again, music has it's like fusions. Like so,
Yeah.
a lot of R&B records can have a hip hop feel,
Mm-hmm.
and depending on what those elements are in the song is how I would approach it. But yeah, did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Just wanted to know, how that works because I'm sure in the '80s, people that were mixing, when hip hop was still a new genre, people that were mixing R&B records, they probably, I don't know, maybe they had a hard time, probably, just with the trying to figure it out with like the sampling and stuff.
Oh, you mean like for hip hop?
Yeah, like
Uh huh.
if how would an engineer approach different genres that they're not even used to, or is it the same concepts? Is it the same creative process or technical process?
Maybe you know what I do? I just reference stuff. I'll
Yeah,
listen, and so much music has. I'm in a situation where so much music has come before me. So,
yeah,
but back if they didn't, if it was something very new to them, where it's just like, yo, I never heard this before, they probably did it based upon feeling and the artists and producers input as well, where they're like, yeah, nah, this got to be like this. And I'm pretty sure they was probably
yeah,
bumping heads at a certain point, but I feel like at that point, well, it's always a collective, but at that point, yeah, is you're gonna have many people who are involved in
yeah.
the process contributing to how it sounds, and it's your job to give them what they want.
Would people be surprised how collaborative the process of mixing is?
I don't think so. I don't think they should be.
Yeah,
Because obviously the artist is always it's their song, it's their
yeah,
product. And I feel like if you guys are totally on two different ends, then maybe you should part ways. At least
mm,
that's what I would do as an engineer. If it's something where I'm like, okay, well, I have my own sound and brand too, and this is an art form for me as well.
yeah,
If we can't find a happy medium, there's been times where I'm like, I don't think this is going to work out, and you just gotta move forward. Yeah.
yeah. Do artists ever micromanage you?
Yeah, those people are annoying. I mean, I tolerate it. I sometimes am like, why'd you hire me if you
Yeah,
gonna tell me how to do my job?
yeah,
And that's why sometimes I'm like, yo, how about this? Send me the files and I'm gonna work on it a little bit, and then when it gets to a certain point, we'll come in together and do exactly what you want.
yeah,
But there's a lot of things that I would have to do. And sometimes when I'm doing, they be like, "Nah, that's too much reverb." And I'm like, "Yo, chill out." I just was listening to how the reverb sound because I'll do like extreme
yeah,
movements and
yeah,
things
yeah.
like that. And they're like, "Nah, I didn't like the way that sound." I'm like, "Chill out."
Yeah, I'm not even done yet.
Yeah, I was just like, sweeping for certain frequencies to make sure I got it all. Like, it's just like weird. It's like you gotta
Yeah.
explain it, and they don't know what you're talking about sometimes. And yeah, those people can be annoying, but again, you just gotta do what you gotta do. you
Hmm.
know.
What equipment do you need to start out with? Like, say a kid says, "I want to start mixing," you know,
Uh-huh.
a young you or a new version of you. What equipment would you say you need to buy?
Well, at the very, very, uh, I guess basic and or like necessary things you would need to start, you need a computer or a laptop. Um, to each their own. People have, whether they like PCs or
Hmm.
Macs or whatever. I can tell you certain components that you would probably need in it, so it's a functioning computer.
Yeah.
Uh, but you would need a computer. You would need a interface, an audio interface, to connect you from the computer world and I guess what's going on out here, you know. And you would need uh, a DAW, digital audio workstation, whether that's Pro Tools, Logic, FL,
Yeah.
Ableton, etc. And you would need a set of monitors, a decent pair. Try to go as flat as possible because if you have something where the bass is enhanced,
Mm.
you're not going to hear it the way it should be heard, and then you probably won't have enough bass in your mix
I
or
get
the high,
that.
so something like that.
Yeah.
And I would say also a decent pair of headphones, so that way you can reference. You listen on the monitors, listen to
Yeah.
headphones. And then I also like those Apple the earbuds, the wired ones.
Yeah.
I feel like those are pretty good to reference on too. So I have like two sets of headphones. I'll see how they'll listen on those because a lot of people use them, and I'll see how they sound in like some high end headphones that I have, especially for uh spatial reasons,
Hmm.
whether it's reverb or panning, or it's just like, okay, that was just too odd. It was just too far to the left
Yeah.
or something like that. And then and my monitors, which I'm mostly relying on to mix with. And yeah, I don't think I'm leaving anything. And you might want a microphone too, a decent microphone. If you're just doing it for mixing, I guess that would be maybe the last thing. It wouldn't be a priority, but I would say you should because you might want to start recording, or maybe you're working with somebody. They're like, "Hey, can I add this in? I had that happen before," and I'm like, "Yo, like."
Yeah.
In my mind, I'm like, this is a whole different service, but you know what? I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna just do it for you, like, yeah, but yeah.
Yeah. So after going through that process of trial and error with the early equipment,
Uh-huh.
what do you think is the next? Like, what is the advanced equipment?
I feel like a lot of people are in the box these days, so
Yeah.
you might want to research certain plugins, whether they're specifically for effects like reverbs and delays or saturations and stuff like that, so that way you can add those textural elements to your mixes.
Yeah.
Or if you I would definitely upgrade my monitors to something better if if I didn't have the best ones.
Yeah.
And my microphone as well. What else? Depending on your interface, yeah, you might want to upgrade one of those
Yeah.
too. I usually, especially for like, I guess they call them prosumers, is like the consumer slash professional, is like a
Yeah.
blend of it. I always suggest that maybe you get something like from Universal Audio or something like that, because although it could be pricey, the preamps and the noise floor on it is relatively low. But not everybody can afford something like that, so maybe I'll suggest like a Focusrite uh
Mm.
interface. Those are pretty solid too,
Yeah.
I guess, in the beginning stages. But yeah, those are the things that I would probably upgrade everything I mentioned prior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How blunt are you with artists in the studio? Like when, when in the middle of recording, as a recording engineer, like, is there a fine line between constructive criticism and straight up insulting the artist? Like, you ever say, yo, this shit
I
is trash?
don't believe I've ever insulted an artist. If I did, it wasn't intentionally. Sometimes I have been told, not in a working situation, because maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable telling you that, but just in my personal life, that I can be pretty blunt. And I'm like, what did I say?
You
Like,
want me to
I
lie to
never,
you?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, that was my way. So I do try to find a way to, I guess, sugarcoat it in a way because artists are sensitive and it makes
Yeah.
sense. Because I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings. Like, I'm like, yeah, I'll suggest maybe, like this is you have a lot of potential. Maybe you should, invest in singing lessons. And everyone, not everyone, but I would say like 85% of the people you tell that to, you can tell they feel away at first. But when
Mm,
you elaborate as to
yeah.
why, and then you elaborate that everyone does it who takes it seriously, that it will only help you, they're usually like in the end, by the end of the conversation, they seem to be a little bit more okay with it.
Hmm.
But my strategy is, and maybe I shouldn't say what my strategy is because then people are gonna know I'm doing it to them. But usually, what I do is I say something nice first, like yo, I really like what you did here, but
But
try this, or
yeah,
something like that, because that way they don't feel as discouraged. Because once the artist gets discouraged, the session usually goes downhill from there.
mm,
It's hard to get that back from them. So you have to try to carefully, and I really do
yeah,
my best to do so. But also sometimes when you sugarcoat it, they don't always understand what you're saying. So
because
that's
you're just using a bunch of words instead of just really being
being
direct.
direct about it, which I
Yeah,
prefer. When I get criticism or critiques, I'm like, yo, straight up tell me,
yeah,
so that way I can get better. Um, but when you're a girl, people tend to like, oh yeah, it was cool. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go ask somebody else because they don't like they don't like to hurt your feelings, and I'm like, yo, my feelings are not gonna be hurt. I asked you specifically
yeah,
to do this, but some people don't tell you. Uh, so yeah, I tried to be as straightforward as possible, but also there's a way to be straightforward and not harsh or cruel. So
yeah.
yeah.
Tell people about the the intangible parts of recording. Not the being on Pro Tools, on a DAW or bringing up certain levels and instruments. Like, what about the intangible parts? Just the feeling, like how you just spoke about how the mood goes downhill in the session if you say something too harsh first instead of like leading with
Mhm.
the compliment first. Like, tell people about how important the energy is of the recording session.
Yeah. Oh wow, that's actually a really good question. Honestly, vibe or it's feng shui or whatever they say, really. Oh, I'm sorry. Really is an important part of it because I noticed like if an artist comes into a space like because I freelance all around New York City,
Yeah.
if the room is dirty or if it just looks disheveled or organized disorganized, oh my god, like that,
Chaos.
yeah. And then even like something like even what they're hearing in their headphones, like
Mm,
if the headphone sound isn't right, that could definitely like
yeah.
change the energy of the session. If it smells a little funny, like like it just kind of you try your best to create a space where it's like obviously a professional environment, but it also feels like they're at home or at least in a place where they can be completely comfortable
Hmm.
because people don't notice it, and maybe even sometimes artists don't realize that their vibe changes when something's But if you try to get your space or the environment as perfect as possible, I in my personal experience, things tend to run smoothly
Yeah.
if everything looks right or
Hmm.
as professional as possible.
Yeah.
And I find that have a better experience recording with artists in an environment like that. Candles, some people don't like candles, but yeah, like
If
nice
a person
scents.
doesn't like a candle, then they're a serial killer. Because
some
that's crazy.
some people are allergic to like stuff
My
like that. Yeah.
I apologize.
Yeah, no, no, but I do like candles. Some certain things like incense will like I you could probably hear it will like mess me up in my
Yeah.
sinuses. I'm like allergic to everything. Uh, but I don't believe I'm allergic to candles. But I did work with someone who was allergic to candles.
And then they died in the studio session.
No, they
Oh, okay.
didn't. You just knew not to have them in the
Okay.
session. Like, be like, yeah, no candles. But they do have candles now where it's just like you kind of have like this I don't know, it's like a unit and you just place the cup inside and it heats up the cup, like the milk cup.
Yeah.
So you'll get the scent without actually have to light anything, which is pretty cool. I'm like, I really love it. I have one in my house.
So let's add a candle maker to your resume as well as a Grammy winning and Grammy
I didn't
nominated
make it.
Grammy nominated engineer. Um, what are the technical blocks that you face in the process of mixing? And is mixing? Would you say it's more technical or creative?
It's mixing is both.
Yeah.
Um I feel like recording is a little bit more technical. You can get a little creative with recording, but mixing is a lot more creative, especially depending on the kind of music you're working on. If it's not something that's too traditional and you have room for creativity to add your own sounds to it, it can be.
Yeah.
But me personally, I find something that can be a block is if I'm not in the right headspace mentally. Like if I'm not feeling well, if my mental health is in order, it will affect how the mix comes out sometimes. And then I'm sitting there because, like I said, I mix off a feeling
Mm-hmm.
or how the song feels.
Yeah.
And if I'm not connected with the song in that way, I can. Those are the mixes I usually don't like. Where I'm like, dang, I wish I wasn't going through whatever I was going through, but you still got to get it done. And obviously, it was approved for the artist, and they liked it. But in my mind, I go back like, oh, that could have been so much better
Yeah.
had I been in the right headspace. It's just even certain things you do with automation to create a certain feel for it. Yeah, so for me, I don't know about other people. That's a good question because I don't really talk about stuff like that. But I'm gonna
Yeah.
ask people. I'm like, yo, so what are certain things that will make you, not make your mix come out the best, or what it could be? I'm
Yeah.
gonna ask because for me, it's that.
Mm-hmm. You have a very behind the scenes job. Do you think that when people think of the music business, they think of the career path as of an engineer as something that they can become successful and and be successful and not be famous? Because I think that people think success is synonymous with fame in the music business.
Um, you know what? I think it's weird. I think a lot of people think when they see someone, especially even if it's their first time in the studio, when they walk in, that my job is the exact same thing as a producer, a
Yeah, I
music
was gonna
producer.
ask you that
Yeah.
too.
And now there are certain situations where the lines may blur,
Yeah,
uh, where you're kind of doing production like elements, and then maybe even for the producer, like vice versa. But um, I think you would have to know about it to want to do it,
yeah,
And again, because prior to me getting into it, I thought it was a producer thing, but I didn't even understand how records came about. I mean,
yeah.
obviously, I knew there was a recording process, but what that entailed,
And
I
you
didn't
still
know.
are a part of the production.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
That's true, especially when you start, making the productions more interesting, especially if you have something that is a bit repetitive. You
yeah,
might add certain elements to it where it's like whether it's a filter effect,
yeah,
whether it's a drop, whether you like cut the drums up and be like, all right, this kick needs to be a triplet right here or
yeah,
something like that. I do things like that.
yeah,
Just to make the mix more interesting. But at this point in my career, I have yet to have received production credits on something.
mm,
I think there was one song they gave me like an assistant producer
yeah,
credit. I didn't even know what an assistant producer was. But then when I went back to check it at a later date, because I needed proof of certain
income.
things that I worked. No, no,
Yeah.
no, just
Oh,
proof of certain things that I worked on, like my
yeah,
resume. They changed my credit to like assistant engineer again. I'm like, whatever. I genuinely don't care. But
yeah,
yeah. So I think one time I contributed to a mix in which they were having a hard time going into the featured artist verse.
Yeah.
uh, and they were trying to figure out a way to transition into that. And I heard my mentor at the time working on it, and I was like, you know what you did could work, but maybe adds like he did like this reverse effect. I was like, yo, if you add skips into it,
Yeah.
like almost like DJ scratches, I think it would work.
Mm.
And that's what they did. And I guess originally they gave me assistant producer credit on it, but either way,
They
like
said,
I
"Whoa,
don't.
whoa, let's not give her too much money." Whoa, whoa, wait.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're credited as something, like it's not like I was gonna go and be like, "Yo, you owe me money." Like like there's levels to it. I don't have that type of clout to be
Yeah.
like, yeah, like I need points on the record. Like I wouldn't do that. But yeah, it was cool to be because when I hear it, I'm like, "Yo,
Yeah.
that was cousin B,"
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Let's talk about the credit and just we were speaking about this off camera when we weren't recording about engineers not getting any residuals. Why do you feel like engineers deserve residuals?
I mean, I do, but anybody else listening that's not an engineer would probably be like that. I'm being biased
Yeah.
about it, but yeah, I mean, there's a lot of records I worked on that I know
And that
for
was
a
like a calm
fact.
flex right there. I do.
uh, there's a lot of records that I worked on that I know for a fact. If I didn't mix it the way I did, people wouldn't like it as much.
Yeah.
And it's just because I took the initiative to make certain moments or elements of that song more special.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right, this part, this is, I like what the artist is saying here. This needs to stand out. Or, uh, okay, it's just a little bit too repetitive here. This part needs to be more interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe I might even do like a reversal of the beat. Or maybe I might reverse the intro, have like this effect where it's like kind of like transitioning and then boom, have the drums come in heavy.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact that if I didn't do those things, sorry, I know for a fact if I didn't do those things, the record wouldn't be what it was. And yeah, I mean, technically, you're adding to it, like you're adding to the production
Mm-hmm.
of the song. But that's a conversation I would like to have with other people who are getting paid the
Yeah.
residual incomes or getting points on the record and see
Yeah.
their thoughts on it. Because I have had some of these conversations, and a lot of engineers feel the same way I do. I don't think I know one that doesn't, because like who's gonna say like yeah, I don't, I don't think we deserve more money. Nobody's gonna say that.
Yeah.
But I have spoken to producers and artists who do feel that way. They're like, what? Y'all picked the record, and
Yeah.
I don't want to like brag, but a lot of us do make the record.
Yeah.
You
Some
know?
people can't sing, and then they sound amazing on the record,
Oh
and
my
I'm
gosh.
sure you you have experience with that.
Yeah, I kind of performed a small miracle recently where I was just
Wow.
like, yo, I didn't think I'd be able to do this, but there's certain things you can do with editing vocals, because if the person can sing relatively, then yeah, you can fix it. It's just like, all right, I can fix your pitch, and I can fix your timing,
Mm.
and on this note, because you saying it may be a little too abrasive, I could lower it and make it softer.
Mm.
Like technology's crazy, but it took me hours to do it, but the
Wow.
song came out way better. You know.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is this a lucrative career path?
Lucrative. I feel like it can be.
Yeah.
Um, especially, you know, I guess part of it's politics too. I
Yeah.
feel like it can be, but I don't think it would be for everyone.
Yeah.
But it definitely you could, because there's so many things you can do in audio outside of uh music. You can do corporate audio where you're like, setting up mics for meetings and things like that. So everybody in the room who's at the seminar can hear them.
Yeah.
or even if it's virtual, you can do it for things like that. What else? There's live sound, concerts, and things like
Yeah.
that. So, and then there's movies, film. So
Mhm.
there's so many ways you can make money in audio. You just gotta hustle and I guess politic
Yeah.
right.
How important was it to be a part of Young Guru and Ali's Engineers Mix Madness?
You know what? That experience was actually really cool because I didn't even think I was gonna get picked for it.
Yeah.
It was the top of the pandemic, and like I said, it might have been April. Pandemic happened in March.
Yeah.
I'm like, yo, they was giving away $5,000. Like, you know what? Whatever. I'm gonna try it
Wow.
because I don't know where money's coming in because nobody knew what was happening at the beginning of the pandemic, and when they actually selected, I was surprised. I was just like, because the mix that I submitted, it was a good mix, and I still, for the most part, like it to this day. But I did have to do it like years ago before,
Oh,
so I didn't know if it was gonna get
if you
picked
were as
up.
good as you were at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've gotten better in a lot of
Yeah.
in a lot of different areas, but there's certain things that I was doing then, especially because of the environment I mixed
Yeah.
it in. I was in a multi-million-dollar studio,
Yeah.
acoustically treated. I had some of the best monitoring
Hmm.
systems in the world to reference off of, and then also I had people there to critique it.
Yeah.
So where I'm like, okay, I help me make this better. So the mix did come out pretty solid. There's things is different. There's things I would do about it differently, obviously now. Um, but the artist herself, like the singer that was singing on the song, she's so talented
Yeah.
that it just made the job easier.
Yeah. You didn't have to really mess with her voice too much.
Yeah, so I picked a song that I knew sounded really good in terms of the performance because sometimes people can get distracted from the mix, since they were judging the mix, from a poor recording, if that makes sense, or
Yeah.
a bad delivery from an artist. But that was a cool learning experience. I wish I got more critiques on the mix.
Yeah.
That's my one thing that I would have wished I got out of it. But I met some really cool people that I still talk um, to this day, and there was a lot of women who were in it, and that was pretty cool
Yeah.
because when I first started, it was very male dominated, and it still is obviously. But
Hmm.
I would say probably around 2018, 2019 is when I started seeing a lot more women, and to have as many women in that contest as it was, I try to be as supportive as possible of all of them if I can help out, or and honestly, a lot of some of them helped me out too. Like I want to build a community amongst women in this field. But yeah, I really appreciate that experience because listening to everyone else's interpretation of a song of the mix was just like, yo, that's crazy. Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't even thought to do that,
Yeah.
and that's what I've gotten out of it the most. I kind of hope he does it again, whether I participated or not, because again, I just want to hear different
Yeah.
people's approach to the same song. You don't really get that. You When you hear mix, you just hear the mix. You don't hear
Yeah.
other people who have it, and you don't get to compare. So yeah,
When you say you wish you received more critiques, you mean from Guru and Ali?
yeah, because
Because they just complimented you and they didn't, yeah,
yeah, like
elaborate.
because especially then, I mean, it also helped change my mindset too, because now I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna just hunker down and do what I gotta do,
Yeah.
figure it out. But back then, because like I said, I started focusing on mixing around that time because it was the top of the pandemic. I wanted more information or what they thought, or more insight into what they thought about the mix, so that way I could learn from it. But now I just will sit there and listen to something I did over and over, or I'll go back to something I did, even if it was like a month ago, 3 months ago, and I'll go back to it and I'm like, okay, this is what I would change about this now. And then now I find myself spending more time listening to other people's mixes than I actually do mixing. I guess it's kind of evened out actually. But I spend a lot more time listening and studying,
Yeah.
and that's how I'm gonna get there. Like That's my approach to getting there because one, these people are very busy. They probably don't have the
Yeah.
time to sit there and tell you. Um, you know, there's probably a lot of people contacting them who want the same thing. So there's that aspect to it. But also, it's an opinion. Like mixing is very subjective.
Yeah.
And like I said, at one point you're like very hypercritical of everything, and then you
Yeah.
get to the point where you just accept it as art. And there are certain people and things that they do within their art that I appreciate, and I'm like, you know what, I want to take that and find a way to add this to my sound, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
enhance it, or maybe I'm like, that was a cool idea, but it didn't really hit the way it should, and then sometimes it'll just inspire something else.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Do you ever, because you say you listen to a lot of mixes, do you ever have other engineers send you their mixes to critique or improve their mix?
Actually, yeah. Uh, from all like, even some I remember it hasn't happened in a while, but even some of my mentors were just like, "Yo, what you think about this?" And to me, that's like, like me, like you want to know what I think about it? They've been doing it for like 15, 20 years longer than I have. So when they ask, I'm like kind of honored. And then you have other people who your peers that may ask and send you something and be like, "Yo, what do you think?" And I think that's important because we're helping each other out, you
Yeah.
know. And there's some people I just like. My friend Alexis, she's a mixing engineer as well.
Yeah.
Uh, we do that from time to time. I'm like, "Yo, what you think about this?" And based off what we say, we're like, "All right, well, we'll either take it into consideration or be like,
Yeah.
oh, you're right," and then you just fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to Alexis engineers.
Or shout out to shout out to. Yeah. So you got to get into this, of course. You you're you have a Grammy. You won a Grammy, and you're nominated for a Grammy. How many nominations this year?
uh, Nominated in two categories: album of the year and best R&B album.
And then for the ones that you won with her,
Mhm.
um, what are the ones that you won so far?
Well, it was the best R&B album for. You know what? That's actually it right there. What year does that say? Is that 2018, 2019?
Wow.
Does it say?
It says 2019.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was. She won in a few categories, but the ones that I guess I qualified to receive a certificate in was best R&B album
Yeah.
and album of the year in 2019, I
Yeah.
guess. And it's the same situation again this year.
Yeah.
She put out an album, and the album got nominated in both those categories
Yeah.
again. So we'll see how it goes in
Yeah.
April.
So you don't get a physical Grammy, you get a certificate?
You can get a physical one depending on how much you did on the
Yeah.
album. I think this year, if she were to win album of the year, they would give us a trophy. But for the best R&B category, you have to do something like 51% of
Oh,
the
okay.
album. And granted, on that project, I did work on a lot of songs, but I worked mostly as an assistant.
Yeah.
That was most of my credits. So they just like they gave me the
Yeah.
certificate, and then for she didn't win album of the year, so we didn't get anything for that. But yeah, I mean, I see. It sounds like these days it would be kind of hard to actually get a trophy because I see that a lot of artists bounce around from city to city and
Yeah.
recording, and
It's like where do
it's
you
kind
mail that?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of rare that someone works on a project for like 50% of a project or
Yeah.
something like that. And I think for album of the year, it was something like 33% before, but now I think they're implementing, if I'm not mistaken, that if you win, everyone who's a part of the project gets a trophy.
Yeah.
So yeah.
When did you meet her?
When?
Yeah.
Crazy. That is actually a really crazy story. I actually came across her before I got into music. Period. Like I might have been like 18,
Yeah.
and I was like a big Alicia Keys fan.
Hmm.
So I was on YouTube looking up videos, and then I came across young her. She's probably about 10 years old
Yeah.
at the time, um, singing an Alicia Keys song on like I don't remember if it was Good Morning America or what. And that was my first introduction to her. And fast forward, I am into music. I graduate audio school. I'm interning at Quad Studios. I remember she came in. I said, "Who's coming in?" I saw on the dang, I saw on the paperwork that it was like Gabby Wilson. I was
Yeah.
like, what? And I was like really excited.
Yeah.
And everybody's looking at me like, "Why are you so excited?" And I'm like, "Yo, like this girl is talented." Like, so I started pulling up videos
Yeah.
of when she was younger. And I I showed actually Max, the guy you met, the owner of the spot.
Yeah.
He was the assistant on that session at the time. And he didn't understand why I was so excited, but when he worked with her, he was just like, when he was in the room, I didn't get to go in the room.
Yeah.
He was in the room and he was just like, yo, like, oh, he was just like, I got a picture with Gabby. He was like kind of like rubbing it in my face that he got this.
So was he
picture.
the lead engineer on those projects?
For the Grammy ones?
Yeah.
No, he wasn't.
Okay.
Mickey Susumi, and yeah, Mickey Susumi was the one who pretty much did that majority of that project.
Yeah.
There were a few of us on it, and some people that I don't know
Hmm.
because she might have did some overseas or in a different city. But for the most part, Mickey, uh, Shamel Hughes, and Robert L.B. Dorsey and myself were on quite a few songs as
Yeah.
engineers. Uh, and Max also did work on it as well. I remember one day he came in to work, and I remember I was about to leave. He's like, "Yo, don't leave me here," because there was
Yeah.
nobody there, and I'm like, "Yo, there's no assistant here." I was like, "Yeah, I'm not working today," you know. And I think we went. I just stayed and helped him anyway
Hmm.
because it was my homie. I couldn't let him. I couldn't
Yeah.
leave him high and dry.
Yeah.
And I think afterwards, I ended up going to the movies with her anyway. I think we went to go see Wonder Woman. But yeah, so that was a pretty cool, interesting session that day. But I met her at Quad the last day of the session, and I was invited into in the room at the end of the last day of her lockout. I think she was there for like a week, maybe it was 3 days, and there was a songwriter there by the name of TC, and he invited me in the room because he liked me, thought I was nice, and my introduction to TC was my first day working there.
Yeah.
He came in and there was nobody there. Miscommunication with the studio staff because they were like, "Yeah, nobody's coming. Just hold down the fort just in case someone delivers something." Yada yada yada.
Yeah.
Long story short, they completely forgot a session was coming in, and I was the only person there, and it was my first day, and I didn't really know where anything was. And I ended up faking the funk for like 4 hours until
Yeah.
I had to say, "Yo, I'm sorry, I can't find exactly what you're looking for." It was like a specific mouse that he used. And I was like, "This is my first day here. Do you know where it would be?"
Hmm.
And he's like, "This is your first day here?" He was like, "Oh," like it was just really funny. But he let me sit in the room in that session. So when he saw I was there later on in the week, he invited me in the room, and that's how I met her. And crazy thing is, we're sitting there talking about music and different eras of music, and I think I mentioned something that she wasn't really familiar with, and it might not have been like a Walkman, but it was something that
Yeah. I
you kind
read
of had
that.
to
I
be
read that
there.
one
Yeah,
article. Yeah.
yeah, and she was just like, her face looked like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's like like little cassette player. It's a type of cassette player or like CD player or something like that." And she was like, "Oh," and I was just like, that's when I was just like, "Holy shit, I forgot how old she is." Um, and so that was the first time I met her, and then I ended up leaving Quad, and I took a break from there because I felt like my education had peaked, and then also I was
Mm.
running low on money.
Yeah.
So by the time I came across her again, I remember being at IAR, the school I worked at as a tutor,
Yeah.
talking to Shamel that I mentioned earlier. He was just like, you should apply at this studio. I was just like, yeah. But in my mind, I wasn't because the last internship I feel like he referred me to, it was a little janky. So
Mm.
I was like, you know what? I'm not going to take his referral. Like, I brushed it off. I walk outside because I finished my shift, finished talking to him. And immediately after, I run into a student that I used to tutor. And he was just telling, I was like, yo, how's life after graduation? He told me he had an interview at the spot. And he was like, yo, it's this big, it's called Oz Studios. It's big, it's like this living room on steroids. It's really nice. They have all this analog gear. And I'm like, yo, that sounds really cool. And he just kept saying some guy named Jason, Jason this, Jason that. And then in my head, a voice goes, ask him what Jason's last name is. And I just said, what's Jason's last name? And he was like, Panali. I was like, oh, Jason. Jason used to be a studio manager at Quad.
Okay.
And I guess he left Quad to work at Oz Studios. And I called Jason. I was like, yo, I'd love to work for you again. Um, do you have any positions available? And he was just like, oh, I would love for you to work for me again. And he just told me to hit him up later on in the week. I did. He didn't hit me back. I waited a week. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go back to school.
Yeah.
Because remember, I told you earlier, I had a list of goals.
Yeah, and I was
just like, yeah, I was like, I'm just going to go back to school. And I remember opening up the website because I was going to go back to RCC for the occupational therapy program. I opened it up and he shoots me a text, can you come in on this day? I'm like, yeah. I just closed my computer. I was like, so I went in and he pretty much hired me, showed me around. And I was working there for like a few days
Quad?
Before
at
the new spot.
Yeah, new studio.
Before I realized the affiliation, because it was a studio, but on the other side, it was like a wall. On the other side, they had the offices and like the business side of it, and it was owned. Our studio was owned by MBK Entertainment, which is hers management company. So that's how I ended up working with her because I stayed there. I got hired there when I was like 22, I think.
Yeah.
And she, at the time, she was young. She was still in high school, but she would take a couple weeks off at a time, come to New York to record.
Yeah.
And yeah, that is how I ended up like. And she actually remembered me. I was just like, yo, this is so cool. She was just like, yeah, I remember you from Quiet. I think it had probably been like a year.
Yeah.
Or so after the
What
time.
year was this?
Well, if I started working there when I was 22, it would have had to be 2012, 2013.
Oh, so she's is way before we even knew who she was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like way before she was her.
Yeah.
And yeah, she it's crazy. It's just like kind of like I would say I watched her grow up, but I was 22 at the time. I just feel like we grew up together in a way, like, you know. And I feel like around that time wasn't really a lot of people around. I mean, I'm about 8 years older than her, but there's not a lot of people around her age. So certain things we had in common, like certain references to shows. Like I think one time I referenced something and she just like looked at me. She was like, "Were you copying SpongeBob?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Like, she was just like, so we had something like that. And if she had homework, I tried to help her out with it. When she got into chemistry, I couldn't really help her. But yeah, so it was a cool experience, and it's like fate because I came across her before I was even thinking about doing music.
Yeah.
Then I happened to meet her when she comes to Quad, and then all of a sudden I leave Quad, and that was one of the deterrences. Actually, I was just like, you know what? If I leave Quad, I'm probably not gonna find another spot like this where I get to work with this caliber of artists. And then boom, I ended up working for her management company studio. It was private. We worked with everyone on their roster, but it was a really cool experience.
Yeah. How do you become like an in-house engineer at a studio? Like when does it feel like this is home?
I guess when you get hired at one. In the situation when I was working at Oz Studios, I started off interning.
Yeah.
Then eventually I got hired as an assistant. And then eventually I started getting engineer work when the main engineers, I was probably like fourth in line
Yeah.
for engineer work. And there was only 2 rooms. So it wasn't often. I did a lot more assisting than I
Yeah.
did recording. But that was how I got into situations where it's just like, okay, we're gonna hire you to record. I remember you from here. Can I book you for this? And also, I ended up working here at the Dono Shop Studios in
Yeah.
Brooklyn, 910 Grand Street. I started working here because of Max, and I met Max at Quad. You know,
Yeah.
he was an assistant then. He did assistant and engineering work, but it depended on the gig, and
A lot
I
of full
was
circle moments.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And fast forward to when the studio opened, which I'm losing track of time because of the pandemic, but it might have been like 2017. No,
That's
no,
when this studio opened.
nah, this probably opened a little after that, probably
Okay.
2018 or something like
Hmm.
that. Yeah, when he opened this spot, he asked me to come here to work, and
Hmm.
that's how I got here.
Yeah.
So I guess it's nepotism in a
I
way.
mean, it's a part of this industry,
Yeah.
honestly, nepotism. Yeah. What is the highest level? Well, what does it feel like? I just want to go back. How does it feel like to be a part of a Grammy winning project to get that certification?
um, you know what? I realized very recently that not a lot of people get that opportunity, and I did take it for granted. I'm
Okay.
learning now to be more present
And
and
appreciative.
grateful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm extremely grateful for that because not a lot of people get to do that, and a lot of people that
Most.
yeah, that's true, and a lot of people that were a part of that project. Here I am. I was probably like 28 at the time.
Hmm.
Here I am, 28, 29 years old, in a situation that some of them didn't get to. They were like 40 something
Yeah.
or like late 30s or something like that. And I thought about it. I'm like, yo, you're bugging right now. You are bugging, and you should be grateful for this. And I guess in my mind, I'm just so used to like running and gunning and work, and then I'm like, okay, what's next? Okay, what's next? And it's not that I was completely ungrateful for it. Um, it's just that I didn't show the level of gratitude I should have
Yeah.
because, like you said, like that, it's rare. It's not something
Yeah.
that happens to everyone. So it does feel good. It took me a while after the fact. Like I think it took me a year to even realize or for it to click that it happened.
Yeah.
I guess I had a little bit of imposter syndrome.
Mm.
And then a year after that, I think that's when I started going like, yo, you gotta take time to be more present in the things that you
Yeah.
do and start celebrating little moments. Because I'm all about I gotta work harder, I gotta work harder, and
Yeah.
that's you gotta have balance.
Yeah.
At least celebrate it, acknowledge it, be grateful for it, and then go back to work.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm implementing and practicing every day now.
Yeah. Was it that you were also just trying to process, what it meant?
that that too, because it's not like anything really, physically changes in life. It's not
Yeah.
like, you play a video game. If you go to a different level, the environment might look
Yeah.
different or something like that. Uh, to me, it was, I guess also because we didn't expect it. Um,
Really?
yeah, because when she was putting out these projects like Volume One,
They weren't
Volume
technically
Two,
albums.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when they consolidated the projects and
Yeah.
released it as like a, is it an LP?
Yeah.
Um,
Or EP or something.
yeah. I don't even
But
know the
times
difference.
change
I'm
with the
embarrassed. I don't
classifications.
even know the difference at
No,
this
I mean
point.
nobody knows. It's just everybody. People don't even say they got an album. They be like, got a project coming out, and then
There
it's
you
like,
go. Was
you,
she consolidated as one
yeah,
project?
yeah. Then people drop like 10 projects on a major label and be like, on the 11th, this is the debut album. I'm like, you've been. These are all major label projects before that. How does that?
Yeah.
Like, what? How do you? You know what I'm saying? Because I remember back, and this is not even that long ago. You know, pre Apple Music, with like Dat Piff
Uh huh.
and you know, all the different mixtape streaming sites. Those were mixtapes. Those weren't considered albums because they were free. And once something is for sale, it's an album.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But you know, I guess because there's no more mixtapes anymore because everything is for sale or streaming. You know,
Yep.
everything's basically an album now. Just some people are more of an independent artist. Some people are on a major label.
True.
Yeah,
Yeah. Uh, yeah. I guess that's why it took time to process too. Because
yeah,
I think before the day before the nominations came out, uh, I remember that time. Like my grandma had passed away like a couple months before,
uh,
and I was just ready to. I was tired. I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore.
yeah.
And I feel like every time I get to that headspace where I want to quit, something happens, and then I woke up to a series of texts saying,
Something good
"Congratulations on your
happens. Yeah,
nomination!
yeah.
Congratulations on your nomination!" I said, "For what? Like what categories?" You know, because they were like, "Congratulations on your
Yeah,
Grammy
yeah,
nomination." I'm like, "For what categories?" And they told me, and I was like, "Yo, this is crazy." Because just yesterday, my mom was, I was venting. My mom was looking at me like she didn't know what to say,
yeah,
and I appreciate her not saying anything. Um, and then you know, I was just so distraught the day before, and then all of a sudden, it's
yeah.
just like I'm like, well, I guess I won't quit. This feels like a sign. Uh, so I just stuck with it.
Do you ever feel like, I mean, you were venting to your mom. Were you venting to your mom about just grievances related to music?
I think it was all of it. It was
Yeah,
just, you know, my grandma was just very monumental in my life, and um, I started having regrets because I put in so much time at the studio. Like I said before, I was sleeping there. I just felt like I should have spent more time with her. I mean, the
yeah,
last year of her life, I did spend a lot of time with her for sure. But you know, you just kind of start feeling certain regrets when things like that happen.
yeah.
And I think 4 months before that, my her twin had passed away, and that's when I started realizing for sure, like, yo, you gotta be more present in these people's lives because, you know, they're not gonna always be here. And I kind of, it was weird. Like you didn't really notice I was going, but I kind of took like a year off, uh, in industry work. I was doing stuff from home
Yeah.
and you know doing working with independent artists, but I took about a year off, uh, and especially those last 4 months, I wasn't really working like that. I did some things, but I made sure they were really long hours, so that way I only had to spend a day out or
Hmm.
maybe a week, and then I could go back home and spend time with my grandmother.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I it was just a lot happening. I just realized so many things I missed, especially with my niece growing up. I'm like, yo, I didn't go to her graduation. I think she
Yeah.
was pre-K too. Like, you know, like, you know, I mean, it's still a big deal, especially to hers. Like, you
Yeah.
know, but there's just a lot of things that I missed that I was regretting, and maybe people were dying, or maybe there's weddings I didn't go to, or something
Hmm.
like that, because I was so busy working, and I didn't have a work life balance. I was
Yeah.
just all work. I think I just got into that mode and didn't know how to get out of it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it was a lot of things happening at once. And you know, when you get like that, little things can make, you know, little things that aren't that big of a deal seem just so like they seem amplified in a
Yeah.
way. So yeah, it was a lot of things that I was venting about, and I was just really considering not doing it anymore. I was like, yo,
Yeah.
I think I just want to get a regular job where I don't have to hustle and bustle the way I do.
Yeah.
Something consistent, something I know what's gonna, you know, is coming. And long story short, I decided not to
Yeah.
do that, and you know, keep doing this. But there's many of reasons why I decided to keep doing this. One, that felt like a sign, but two, um, crazy right before then, like I said, I didn't see that many women in industry, but
Mm,
you kind of got to be there so they can see you doing it so they don't quit as
yeah.
well. And I'm not gonna act like, like I'm like super famous or people know me, but there are people who do pay attention and probably do look at me as inspiration. And I feel like I owe it to them as well to just do my best in this, the best that I can.
Do you feel like that's the a decision that you made for the better?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have any regrets.
Do you feel like there's a ceiling that you can reach as or a ceiling that you can peak? Like if there's a ceiling at all in engineering?
Um, I feel like with the way music is evolving so much, as long as you're capable of doing it physically, like your ears and stuff
Yeah.
can work, nah, like I don't believe in having a
Yeah. Yeah.
ceiling. Yeah.
It's a good mentality to have. Yeah. What advice do you have for people like me with podcasts who are editing the audio themselves, and don't have an engineering background?
If there's no budget for an engineer, what you can do is just go online and see what's out there, especially with tutorials. Like, YouTube is crazy now, and it was crazy back when I was in college too.
Yeah.
Before I decided to do music, because that's how I actually passed pre-calc. But now
Wow.
with audio, it's like there's just so much informative stuff out there,
Yeah.
and a lot of people who actually know what they're talking about now.
Mm-hmm.
That, yeah, like if you don't know, you can go find out how to do it. And for you personally, you could always just call if you need some help.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
doubt.
Thanks. And what's next for you?
Um, I'm not sure. I've been saying for a while that I wanted to actually get in production, but I'm actually a little bit more serious about it now because why not? I just want to express myself a little bit more creatively, and I also personally, as I was telling you earlier, I kind of want to dabble in film
Yeah.
and not audio. Like I just want to. There's some things that I want to create. Um, that I'll talk about it when we get there, but
Mm-hmm.
that I see that in my future as well.
Yeah. And why do words matter to you?
Why do words matter to me? I've been seeing a lot of stuff on the internet. It'd be like words or spells and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But honestly, what you say can affect people, whether it's
Yeah.
in a positive way, negative way.
Yeah.
Words do carry a lot of power. So growing up, we were told sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That was
Yeah.
an absolute lie, like an absolute lie.
Sure.
Like I've gotten over the physical pain, but certain things that people say to you, you can
Yeah.
carry that with you for years. Whether, like I said, whether it's positive or negative, and going back to what we said earlier, what my grandma told me when I was about 5 years old, literally changed my whole outlook on life for the
Yeah.
rest of my life.
That's all I have for you today.
Oh, word.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for having me. This was dope.
Thank you.
Feel free to come by the donut shop in Brooklyn anytime.
Okay.
And yeah.
All right. So everybody, man, Words Matter podcast. Have Ayanna Depas here, master, super engineer. I don't even know if that's a thing. Super engineer, like a super producer, but qualified and credible and very skilled, and from Spring Valley, New York, man. A lot of talent out of our small hometown outside New York City. So, be on the lookout for anything she has in the future. I know it might be hard for some people, especially these days, because how would you ever know who engineered anything without there being physical copies of CDs, physical copies of music? But thank you again for coming down here.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for checking out the studio.
Of course. And words matter, man.